Coming up on All About Android, I'm here sitting in the studio with Florence Ion and Ron Richards dialing in, and we are going to talk about our favorite notable stories throughout 2019. From apps to news to hardware, we cover all of those topics up next on All About Android.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Hello and welcome to All About Android, episode 452, recorded on December 23rd for Tuesday, December 24th, 2019, your weekly source for latest news, hardware, and apps for the Android faithful. I'm Jason Howell.
And I'm Ron Richards. Ho, ho, ho.
And I'm Flo. Ho, ho,
there we go. That was good. That was probably the best one.
I blew it.
Yeah, that's okay. I didn't give you any forewarning. Forewarning. We could just do this the entire episode. It won't get old
Ron could
at
be
all.
Ron Rudolph, the red-nosed reindeer Richards.
Oh, yeah. If only you had a red nose.
If you're down for it. Just with
why
the alliteration.
would we want to do that? Why would we want to do that? Yeah. So I will say that there it is. Well done, Jason. Well done.
Right,
I will say that one of my favorite Christmas songs is "There's No Place Like Home for the Holidays,"
Yes.
and for me, home means the bedroom of a 14-year-old girl.
Okay.
As I'm in my niece's bedroom right now doing the show. So there you go. Thanks to my niece Abby for lending her bedroom.
Yep.
Are there posters?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. Posters, and if so, what?
You can't really see it, but the whole wall is pretty much all the U.S. women's national team, soccer team. So a lot of Tobin Heath and Ali Long and folks like that. So
we cut to the wrong camera for that one.
it's okay. There's not, let's see if it comes. I mean, we can see it if I turn the lights on.
We don't. We don't need to get nosy.
So it's all soccer stuff there.
Yeah.
I kind of love that, actually. That's way better than me and my wall of NSYNC.
My wall of NSYNC, too. I totally agree. So this episode is going to be a little different. Obviously, when you receive this episode in your podcatcher, it's Christmas Eve, which means the next day is Christmas Day. So we're kind of trimming things down. We're recording this on Monday, like I said. So we've got a little bit different of a show. We want to make sure that everybody can get out of here and get to their holiday celebrations and all that. So we're keeping it just a little bit shorter. Or at least we say that now. We'll see how it turns out. But we definitely are going a different approach with the show. We're going to kind of dive into each of the normal segments that we do, news, hardware, and apps. But each of us have chosen 3 things to champion from the year to say, like, hey, remember this? And it'll be an episode of lots of swirly, wavy lines as we get little thought, memory bubbles. Actually, we aren't going to go through that much work. Victor, we're going to take it easy on you, Victor. We're just going to talk about these things and spend some time. We won't have an arena today. We're going to keep the arena results the way that they are. What were you going to say, Victor?
Oh, no, I was just saying talking's good.
Okay, yeah. Victor appreciates that. He doesn't want to be here through Christmas editing with all the flashbacks and stuff.
No.
That's next week's episode. The best of episode is basically flashbacks episode. But that's already in the can. So Victor's he's off the hook.
Yeah.
That's what I like to say about Victor. You're off the hook, Victor. All right.
Well, this is a great opportunity to let Victor do the last Android news bumper of 2019.
That's right. This is a pretty important one. A very special Android news.
My bedroom is still full of my old Star Wars figures. Here's Android news. I don't think you really want us to know that.
When I look back on 2019, I'm going to look back on the mental image of Victor's childhood bedroom.
I think for
Thank you,
2020, every news bumper that you do, Victor, should just be a super random exclamation. like I had pancakes for breakfast. It's time for Android news.
Yeah, that was pretty fun. I think that's a good resolution for this year.
All right, good. You can't. Yeah, there's not possibly any better resolution than that. You can stop looking. There you go. All right. So
what about 1920 by 1080?
What?
Bunch.
Thank you, Ron.
That was pretty good.
Okay.
Okay. You know what I will say? This is how like mentally fried I must be at this point, because it took me that long to understand your joke, and that was a good joke. I really should have got it much earlier than that.
You're like on dial-up for that joke.
Totally. Yeah, I was 300 baud. Those characters were printing on the screen very slowly for me. I liked that eventually. Okay. So, all right, so let's talk about some news stories from the year. How do we want to do this? Do we want to go 111, 222, 333, or just each of us like, here's my three? What do you think?
Let's go 111. Let's go round robin.
Yeah, we can do the round robin, then kind of keeps things switched up. Okay, so I'll start. I would have to say one of the important threads of news from this year has been the emergence of RCS, Rich Communications Standard, is that right? Which has been touted as the kind of the iMessage solution for Android. I don't know if it's necessarily going to be that, but
I don't think that's fair to RCS, by the way, to call it the iMessage solution.
It's so many calling it that.
It's the data driven, evolution of messaging beyond SMS. Like that's really what it is. That's iMessage happens to be one of them, but RCS is a non-platform specific protocol.
And you know what? We're probably at fault for everybody going straight to iMessage as the comparison, because for years and years as Android users, we've been saying, but we want an iMessage. We want an iMessage on our platform. And this being the data-driven messaging platform as a replacement for SMS is the closest thing that Google has done to kind of get us there, I suppose. So we're probably at fault for that, but whether it is truly that or not, I guess, that's open to interpretation. But June earlier this year was when Google announced that it would take control of the RCS chat rollout. Last year's when we first heard about RCS, but Google took a very hands-off, like, come on, carriers, don't you want to play ball with us? And then wait, and crickets, and wait again. So finally in June, Google announced that they would do it themselves. In November, they officially rolled out RCS chat to all Android users in the U.S., and everybody has it now, and it's like, well, why didn't you do that in the first place? And that was even a few weeks after the U.S. carriers had announced their cross-carrier messaging initiative, their own RCS approach. So who knows kind of how that dance is going to work out as we lead into 2020. But 2020 will be the year that we find out the answer to that. So, and all of this is happening within Android messages right now, which we will talk about later in apps as well. But RCS, big deal.
Very big deal. Yeah. Very big deal, and one that will continue into next year.
That's right.
And hopefully beyond. I don't know.
Hopefully it'll stick around, unlike many of the other messaging efforts at Google.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, so when I was thinking about the biggest story of the year on my side, I could not ignore the fact that Mr. Sundar Pichai got a promotion. And now after good job, Sundar. After a couple of years of being the CEO of Google, where do you go from there? Well, you become the CEO of Alphabet, which is the holding company that owns not only Google but all of the larger, Google Alphabet enterprise holding companies, Waymo, Google Ventures, like all GV as it's called, all the other investments and all that sort of stuff. And so, while this didn't specifically affect Android like directly, there's no way the ripple effect of this won't be felt by everything we talk about week in and week out here.
That, and also I can't help, like, when anything happens with Sundar, I can't help but kind of feel, even though I have absolutely nothing to do with it, can't help but feel a little Android pride. Like
I do, and a little bit like he owes us, right? I just feel like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know of any other media outlet that's really put his name as far forward as early as we did. We were early on the Sundar train before he was CEO. Yeah. So, so good job, Sundar. Your success is our success.
If Sundar was only here, he'd say something like, "Thank you, all about Android.
And
you were my only hope." Happy holidays. Yeah. Sundar, you would not be where you are if it weren't for us. But not true. Do we think this is like his involvement in Google and Android or Alphabet is going to make any sort of big effect on Android or even detract from his management of Android?
No, I think he's going to unify the platforms. and I know we're talking about like Alphabet here, which is supposed to be this like different branch, but I think what he's going to do is go into Alphabet and just kind of pick projects that really make sense and have traction and kind of align. I know Alphabet is supposed to be like, let's just throw money at building things, R&D, like having this, VC arm, but I think it's going to become more like, let's focus it a little more so that the things that are coming out of it are actually pushing the company forward versus just kind of being this dog and pony show. Mm-hmm. Boston Dynamics dog and pony show.
See.
Oh, I hate that dog. Creepy. So creepy.
I agree.
All right, Flo, what you got? Speaking of Sundar, by the way, because this is his problem now.
This is a big part of Sundar's new job. Sorry, Sundar. So actually, this is not something that we delved a lot into this year, but it was certainly like one of the bigger stories to come out of Google HQ. And that's just, I kind of wanted to just wave to the workers at Google, the people behind the products that we use. There's been a lot going on internally in terms of labor rights, in terms of just people coming together towards a cause, in terms of folks who are just kind of tired with some of the status quo. And it's not just a Google problem. I mean, this is definitely something that branches outside into other parts of Silicon Valley. But we definitely saw a lot of it coming out of Google HQ, a lot of headlines this year. I think one of the bigger ones is in November, we had a redo of the Google walkout that happened. It started late last year in San Francisco, and there was another walkout that happened in late November. There was a huge Wired story about just what it's been like working inside Google for the last 3 years, how things have sort of like shifted, how, it used to be the slogan, "Don't be evil," but ever since that's been removed, it's just kind of like, well, what's going on inside? Is that slogan still kind of the objective of what everybody is working on? We saw that some walkout organizers had left the company or were out of the company. There's still a lot sort of circling around, like what is going on at Google. And I think it's going to be a story to watch out for in 2020 because it is such a big company. It's such a big part of the tech industry, and Google could really set the precedent for other companies in this realm. And I think it's also just important to know we're using all of these products coming from Google. We should probably know what the workers feel like inside. So, something to pay attention to in 2020 that definitely built up in 2019.
Yeah, it definitely has felt like the image that people have about Google, or many people have had about Google, kind of came at a crossroads. Like, I can speak personally last year and this year, and especially talking about kind of how employees internally have been encouraged to kind of share their viewpoints and get involved in everything. But now the company, it seems, now there's articles saying that Google's being accused of union busting after firing 4 employees. It's like this tide has turned. Their image of being welcoming to these viewpoints and to being vocal and expressing themselves as employees seems to be shifting, or maybe it shifted and now we're just seeing the effects of that or whatever. But certainly a story that's going to continue on into this next year. And like you said, very indicative of where we are with big tech in a number of different companies and different ways right now. Google and Alphabet, they are definitely not the only company dealing with this.
Yeah.
But great to see employees feeling like they have a voice and expressing that. And it sucks that in doing so they find themselves out of a job for one reason or another, but maybe that becomes a greater purpose. I don't know.
Well, I think it's. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, when a company gets as big as Google does, I mean, like, their number of employees, equal like some large cities, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So when you get to be that many people involved, these are real issues that emerge that you have to address. And so, they finally come to the forefront, much like so much of our culture across the board. So it's hard to ignore.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I agree. I wanted to conclude by just saying, we remain big fans of this platform and all the products that come out of Google. And so it's hard not to pay attention to the headlines of what's coming through. You want to know what's going on behind the scenes.
You want to feel good about this thing that you have felt, admiration for, Android as a platform.
I mean, we've
covered
been
this for a long time.
The three of us have been users for over 10 years of Google's products, Google's platforms. They're really embedded in our lives. So it's hard for me not to feel like, granted, I don't work, we don't work there or anything, but it's hard not to feel like it's a chunk of your life. I don't know. Perhaps that's how I feel.
That's called into question. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the new rule became, don't read any article with Andy Rubin in the headline.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Don't read those articles and don't put them in the show. You don't need to. It's okay.
Exactly. That was a new kind of unspoken rule this year.
Well, don't take 90 million to do bad things. Yeah. Anyway.
There we go.
Don't treat people like property. I don't know.
Man, and Andy Rubin was nowhere in this doc, but yet here he showed up. Not really along these lines, but definitely along the kind of like political, wave that seems to be moving across a number of different things within the world of technology. Huawei, this is my second pick. Back in May, President Trump had issued an executive order to block U.S. companies like Huawei, who they say posed a national security risk. Google then, if you remember, severed Huawei's Android license to be in compliance with that. Huawei was then restricted to AOSP, and there was a 90-day license that was extended and all this kind of stuff. But ultimately, the Mate 30, the Mate 30 Pro, those launched in September without the Google apps and services. We also heard about Huawei announcing in August its development of the Harmony OS. So that would be, in essence, possibly a replacement of Android as the OS of Huawei's future. And now I just read that plans to launch the P40 and the P40 Pro, that's going to launch the first quarter of 2020 as expected without Google's apps and services. So this is just, we knew this, Huawei going forward, not able to launch with Google apps and services. It's going to be interesting going into 2020 to see kind of the residual effects of that on Huawei's business. So far, they seem to be weathering that storm, but like how long, do those effects last, and does it end up kind of changing that story down the line?
Yeah, I don't know. It's funny.
Sorry.
After you, Flo, go for it.
I just wanted to ask if you guys saw David Ruddock's tweet today about the Huawei. There was a Huawei news piece that they were working on their own search, I think, and like version of YouTube, and it just made me. I immediately thought about this because this is where we're heading into 2020 for Huawei.
No, I hadn't seen that, but I'm not surprised. I think Huawei is grabbing at all the different directions that they feel like they need to save their business. Or to just embolden their business, strengthen their business.
And it's funny because so much of this has been a roller coaster where it seems like it's been up and down, and it's been directly kind of affected by the political ramifications of what's going on in U.S.-China relations and things like that. And honestly, if you had asked me 6 months ago where I thought Huawei would be now at the end of the year, I'd be like, oh, they're toast. They're never going to survive. And now with the recent news of if whatever's going on with China is lifting and now I'm like, oh, well, who knows? Maybe they'll come out of this unscathed and then maybe even stronger and have all this stuff because they're being forced, their hands being forced. So I think it's going to continue to be a roller coaster, and one that's going to be very amusing to watch and kind of, but also not terribly. I mean, it's fun to talk about, but again, it doesn't affect, other than not being able to get their phones here, it doesn't affect us greatly. And that I don't think is going to be a huge threat to Google. The Huawei almost becomes the representation of the lingering question mark of China.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah. Kind of the symbol of that for sure. Yeah, that's a really, really good point.
Yeah.
I think I see the article that David was talking about from Android Central. Huawei is finalizing their Google services replacements with
Android Police.
year-end. Well, no. So he linked to an Android Central article.
From Android Central.
That finalizing Google services
Sorry,
replacements.
Jason.
That's okay. With a year-end launch in sight. So they're getting more aggressive, says the article, with their special incentives for app developers. They're really pushing in this direction. They really have no choice. Like, they kind of have to do this. Thankfully, they already had these efforts in place initially, so they had something to build. And you could be right, Ron. Huawei at the end of the day could emerge out of this stronger as a result of this in a way that we could not have seen coming. We're just gonna have to see.
That's my prediction.
Yeah,
so.
That's interesting. All right, what's your second, Ron?
Well, one interesting story was more of like a story arc that went throughout the whole year that actually culminated a couple of weeks ago when we were here on the show. We were talking about a couple of analysis articles that were talking about the sales of phones this year and how the number of people buying flagship phones, the $1,000 phones, was much less than we would have thought. And this year really was we had a couple of it emerge, in 2018, but 2019 was really the establishment of like the flagship phones are $1,000, period. You had releases from Samsung, you have releases from, of course, Google. You like all these flagship phones kind of paraded out that are increasing the specs, increasing the design, increasing this, the stuff that's available in the phone, and therefore it's $1,000. And not to pat myself on the back, but I've been saying for years that Android phones were getting prohibitively expensive, and you can't rely on the carrier subsidies. And really what the world needs is a good, solid Android mid-range phone or series of mid-range phones. And that's why I embraced a lot of what Motorola's doing, because it seemed like they were trying to do that. And then lo and behold, here we are at the end of 2019. And I feel like the phone, and we're going to talk about it later in hardware, but the phone that I see most lauded as best phone of 2019 is the Pixel 3a, which is the mid-range phone. And I think 2019 is the year the $1,000 and the flagship phone broke. I don't think that the companies are going to stop doing it. It's for the same reason that high-end car companies roll out the fancy super expensive sports car, but also make four-door sedans. So they're still going to lead with the hot new sexy. But if you ask me, the best way to grow Android's community is to grow the mid-range.
Yep. That strategy worked for Motorola around the world.
Yeah, yeah, and it's working in volume.
Yeah. It's working for HMD Global, right, with the Nokia brand.
Sure.
So.
Yep.
Absolutely. And especially because I think for the longest time within Android, the premium smartphones got a lot of attention and got a lot of action because Android as a platform wasn't developed enough for it to run as like in the way that people wanted unless you had that cutting edge technology. Yep. And now things are so much more developed and mid-range processors and all the hardware that's going into even mid-range phones, good mid-range phones, are good enough that even when you're on a solid mid-ranger, you kind of don't see the trade-off as much. You might with specialized things like gaming or something along those lines, but for the majority of use cases, it's going to be fine. You're not going to be running a phone that's always catching up with you, trying to catch up with you. You're running a phone that works.
You look at the key applications that most users, the majority, the median user is using, and it's messaging, internet browsing, and photos.
Yeah.
Right? It's those three things. And
gaming might fall into that category. I'll fill in the gap while your Skype video freezes. Gaming might fall into that gap, but that's for for certain people. But sorry, your video cut out. Yeah. What was the last point?
Sorry, I know. My connection, my laptop is running on fumes right now. No, but I was just saying is that the mid-range phones just need to get photos and internet browsing and messaging right. And then people will follow. That's the main. Yeah. That's the main thing. That's what a lot of the mid rangers that work. Like Motorola's put so much into their camera. Google's put so much into their camera. You don't need a glass back. You don't need fancy stuff. You don't need these super kind of high end flagship kind of bezels and all that sort of stuff. Just make a solid phone that works.
Yep. Agreed. All right, Flo. What's your next pick?
So this one, okay, this is a bit of a self-serving one, admittedly, is why I put this in here. Because if we remember earlier this year on my birthday, I interviewed Hiroshi Lockheimer at Google I.O. So yes, we all remember that. Yep. And while we were at that fireside chat, Hiroshi finally talked to us about what Fuchsia. And I think this is something the All About Android audience has been following along for quite a while now. And so I felt like it warranted to be kind of one of our top news pieces, because it was this thing that was just kind of secretly talked about in kind of like the diehard circles, because we wanted to know how Android and the rest of the Google platforms were going to like move forward. And that's kind of something that we typically find out about at Google I/O. So at the Fireside Chat, we found out that, Google is investing in something Fuchsia-like. It's not necessarily something that may ever come to see the light of day in front of us users, but there is something internally, going on and being played with. And some people, assume that this is something like a new operating system from Google coming down the line, but it's not. Google they said that basically it's not that. It's just something, it's a sandbox where they can try out some new ideas. And I think that very much fits into like the Google realm of how they develop for Android, is to kind of throw a bunch of sticky hands at the wall and see which of the sticky hand toys stick, to offer a metaphor.
The problem with sticky hands is eventually they get very dirty and all mucked up, and you just have to throw them away. And
I mean, it depends on the quality of the sticky hand
and the cleanliness of the surface. Yes, you're right.
Exactly. And Fuchsia is also, it's not just limited to this idea of world with phones and PCs. It's also the idea of the Internet of Things, which of course it has become a buzzword, but at the same time, it is now such an integrated part of being a diehard tech user. I mean, if you have a phone, you probably have a laptop or a computer of some sort, and more than likely, you probably have a smart speaker somewhere in the house. So kind of think about how all these things play together. So we found out kind of what Fuchsia is and kind of what it isn't, and you know what? It made it for a riveting last day of Google I/O, which is usually pretty quiet.
Yeah, and you felt accomplished in your interview because you kind of got like a nice juicy nugget of news from that.
You did it.
You
got it impressive. Out. That was pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, it really sounded like Lockheimer was saying, yes, we experiment with things. Fuchsia is an experiment. We play around with this. It could be good in the world of IoT. It also could not, but it's probably not going to replace Android. And I think that was the big question mark, as people were hearing about Fuchsia and like, oh, well, does this mean the end of Android? And from what Lockheimer had to say in your interview, that's really what I walked away from it. Okay, so you're not like developing that of at this point in time a replacement for Android. The sky is not falling. So that's good.
It is, in fact, not falling, little chicken.
No, although if the sky was falling, it would be very dark outside, right?
Yeah,
right?
It would.
And my third pick is dark theme, just as a general kind of like theme running through the year. This was the year that all those people who have been calling for dark theme for years up until now, they finally got it. They finally got dark theme in all the apps. They finally got the attention that they were hunting for, that they were thirsting for. And now we have dark theme embedded in the OS. We have app developers taking a very serious look at their apps and creating a dark theme and implementing them. It's a feature that we're very used to seeing now. So all of you dark theme fans, this was a good year for you.
It was like a wave of dark mode this year. It was, it was helped by iOS also rolled it out. So like I had people who were iPhone users who knew I was into Android phones coming up to me like, hey, have you ever heard of dark mode? And like, as if it was some new, like it was really kind of bizarre how much this, kind of got so much momentum and so many people like look at, and we're going to talk about it later on in the apps. I mean, it was hard to ignore that it became so ubiquitous and so expected in the apps we use that it really was like a wave of dark mode that we couldn't avoid.
Yep.
So. Yeah.
Yeah, and I gotta tell you guys, I've had insomnia, like complete pregnancy-induced insomnia these last couple of nights. And I can't tell you how thankful I am for dark mode. And I also, on top of that, put another app that blurs out or that dims the screen. Because it's like the only thing that I have that has a backlight that I can read. And it's, when you're just laying there staring at the ceiling. So thank God for dark mode. It also, I feel that my migraines have cut down completely this year.
There you
go. Just like all these little things like dark mode. Oh, it's just a black background with white text. I'm like, meh, it's not just that. It's like a huge usability thing.
Dark mode saved my life, okay? No, actually it didn't. I'm just taking it to the next level. But dark mode saved you, Flo. It saved you from migraines.
Well, and now it's saving me from being bored until 3 a.m. because
there you go. It's keeping you entertained.
Saving you from boredom. It had no idea it was doing that.
So the dark theme was such a huge piece of the way we worked with Android, and this year was a huge. We had a major milestone release with Android 10 rolled out.
Yep.
And which is funny because that didn't make any of our lists because I feel like we're so used to the yearly Android release, and while
I'm realizing that right now too.
Yeah, well, Android. So I'm kind of making it a part of this. Well, Android 10 was such a big, kind of a big milestone. It wasn't a huge game changer, but it was, kind of important. And it also brought apart a rebrand of the Android branding that we saw for the first time since 2014. And going back to kind of what I felt as if was a high mark for us this year on the show. Flo, you mentioned talking to Hiroshi at Google I/O. We got Dave Burke and Dan Sandler from the Android team on the show to talk about the rebrand, talk about Android 10, and to answer a lot of our questions. And I just want to take a moment, and I know we did it at the time, but also applaud Jason for doing all the behind the scenes kind of maneuvering and making this stuff come, happen. And it really, for, kind of pat ourselves on the back for a moment, it felt like not only was this like a major moment in Android, kind of in all the years of covering Android, but to be so directly involved in it. And I kind of giggled seeing articles being written about our conversation with Dave and Dan, cool. Which was as we got answers on questions and where the Easter egg was and what the real story behind this and what's going to happen with the dessert names and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, Queen's cake. But yeah, that was a great way to celebrate a new version of Android, was to kind of go behind the curtain and talk to some of the people who actually are making it. And up to this point, Android 10 has been relatively. It's funny because, a lot of you who watch the show and know me for a long time know I've worked a lot in the comic book industry. And there's one function of comic book making that often goes uncelebrated, and that's the guys who do the lettering, who put the words in the balloons. And the joke is that you only notice bad lettering. Right. You never, very rarely do you look at a comic and be like, oh, man, us font nerds do it. But most people don't even notice it because it just works and it doesn't get in the way. And I feel like the operating system releases are similar to that, in that they become notable when there's a problem, when there's a memory leak, when something doesn't work, when there's a data breach, when whatever's going on. Android 10 was relatively slow news because it just kind of rolled out and worked. And the gestures were kind of controversial, but there was no other real controversy with Android 10, at least in my opinion. And there might have been some other nitpicks and things like that that Ron Amadeo got into, but
he's good at finding those nitpicks.
Yeah, exactly. But for the most part, Android 10 didn't blow up Android for good or for bad. It just kind of continued to evolve the platform.
Completely agree. And gestures, big surprise. At least I can speak from my own experience. Totally used to them. And
haven't touched them. Still.
Oh, you aren't using them.
Nope.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally used to them. It's all muscle memory. Once you use it enough, then suddenly it's no longer controversial anymore. It's just the way you use your phone. So, good pick. All right, Flo, you got the last one in this news block. What is it?
All right, it's a little generalized. But you know what? At the same time, it's not. But at the same time, it is, because it's basically what Google's been doing. We all know AI is the big buzzword, artificial intelligence. It's in everything that Google does. I just think that 2019 was just another year where we just really saw it laced into everything. And of course, as we learned at Google I/O, now a lot of this AI stuff is happening on device, which is great because it enables things like live captions to happen on a phone, so that you can just be on an Instagram story and you don't even need to have the sound on to know what it is that your friend is babbling about in their story.
Mm-hmm. It's a really cool feature, I have to say.
It absolutely is. And it's also great to see how much AI has done for the camera in Google's smartphones. I mean, the Pixel 4 and the Pixel 3 were all about what that AI can do. And we saw with the Pixel 4, that's what Google is really leaning into. Like, this is all the smarts that happen behind the scenes. You don't need all these fancy lenses that like Apple, Samsung, and everybody else has. I mean, I personally would like to see more lenses, but we'll talk about that in the hardware section. But definitely, it's just we're still pushing through on that AI. Now we have a robot that answers spam calls for us, just nearly flawlessly on Pixel devices. It's great. I use it all the time. It's just so much embedded in everything Google does that I think we would be remiss not to mention it, even if it's not technically a new thing, at least talking about some of the advancements that we saw this year.
Yeah, and I don't think it has to be a new thing. This was just a really big year for AI, but in good and bad. You know, it just in general, AI, I feel like, has been touted as the solution to everything, the answer to all of our prayers, and also the potentially, you know, troubling feature of modern day technology that's going to ruin the world. It goes in all directions.
Yeah, I don't want I don't want medical stuff to be all AI'd, but I don't mind if there is an AI in, you know, the camera API that's doing all of this work to make it so that the phone knows this is a picture of the sky. It is 1 a.m. We're going to have a 4-minute exposure right here without me having to go into the settings and adjust all of that. Like that's power. That is appreciated.
Yeah. And you see the results of it in how we use the phones and how, you know, how reliant they are, how we use the phones, and how things are getting easier, better quality, faster, and all of this like related to the AI advancements. It is magical. It really is kind of a crazy wave that's happening right now through technology, and Google's in a prime position to benefit from it. So, great stuff. That was just news. Now it's time for hardware. And we include all types of wear in hardware, including Flo's first pick.
Do you guys remember I don't wear a Wear OS watch?
Yes.
Actually, I'm not even wearing a watch right now. I just kind of, my Galaxy Watch Active has just kind of been, well, it's more indicative of my lifestyle lately. But regardless, this was the year that Wear OS just kind of, you know, that Homer goes into the bush gif. It's basically exactly that animated gif. It's just like Wear OS going. I mean, granted, Google tried some things, you know, buying Fossil. And, hey, here's some great Fossil watches with Wear OS on it. But that didn't really do much to move the needle on it. When we look at market share, Google Android Wear OS is not really moving the needle as much as the Apple Watch, the Fitbit, and even the Samsung watches. And those use their own OS, which is Tizen-based, even though it is compatible with Android devices and with iOS devices. And of course, this year at Google I/O 2019, Wear OS was totally missing from any of the panels. Like, it wasn't. There was one little demo on the. I can't really call it a show floor because it's a giant festival area, but there was
the show dance floor.
Actually, there was a demo in a dome. That's what they are.
There we go.
They're domes where they put all these little demos. So they had a little Wear OS demo to kind of show, because there's a new interface, a new kind of interactivity, a new way of using it. But it's nothing that like really moves the needle on it. And I think later is when we're going to talk about the thing that will hopefully help maybe infuse a little life into Wear OS. But for now, it's just there. You know,
are you talking about Fitbit? Because I don't know that made it in. I don't know what you're referring to. What I was going to. No.
We didn't mention the Fitbit.
But I think it ties into this. I think that to hop onto what you were saying, Flo, I feel like this year was Wear OS light as far as announcements are concerned, but Wear OS there was a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes that might make next year and the year after big kind of movement happening in Wear OS.
Google and Wear OS have gone to therapy to work on their relationship.
Yep.
And right now they're trying to figure out if they're going to cross the threshold into marriage. And before they can do that and really combine incomes and combine households, they need to see how this relationship works. So perhaps Fitbit will be the purveyor of that.
Yeah.
Again, to bring a metaphor to the table. And
I think also, you mentioned the fossil IP. That's part of it. There have been a couple of different movements happening along with the Fitbit acquisition that hopefully that means next year and the year after we're going to actually see some action. We've also been hearing kind of these ongoing rumors of a Pixel Watch. Haven't seen that yet. Maybe that's next year. I don't know. But it has been a quiet year for Wear OS. Hopefully this means we'll see something next year.
But not for the Apple Watch.
No, that's true. And all along, they're Google's losing ground to Apple with every year that they're not doing something amazing with Wear OS. You're right.
Yep.
My first pick has to be the Pixel 3a, which I have right here. We might
phone of the year.
Yeah, I mean,
Yep,
it's definitely. It's on a lot of people's lists. I would probably put it right near, if not at the top spot. I mean, it's hard to argue with why this phone was so great. I mean, it took everything that people loved about the Pixel phones, but nobody was buying because Pixel phones cost a lot of money. It takes the photo capability. It takes, whether you like the design or not. I happen to like the design of Pixel phones, and I think they really did an amazing job of taking that Pixel design and doing a plastic version of it. It doesn't feel plastic. It feels
the
solid.
purple one is so pretty.
And really nice.
I just love it.
Yeah, and I mean the 3A just like $399, and actually now you can get it way less than that. So when we talk about the 3A and like the mid range, man, some of the prices, like it's almost like it's a low end phone, from pricing perspective. Yet you get that amazing camera capability, which is always going to be the thing that sells that, right at the top of the list. So. How can you argue with the Pixel 3a? It was an undeniable hit this year. Definitely took people by surprise, except for Ron. Ron knew that Google was going to do this eventually.
I didn't know they were going to do it. I was begging that they do it.
Yes, you were hoping that they would, and they
really
did.
Believed in it,
and you believed in it, and hey, that belief pays off. Yeah. It's been a really great phone. Anybody that gets it says, "Oh my God, this is amazing," and I only paid $400 for it, if not less. So, Pixel 3a, top of my list.
Hard to argue that's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, for me, the big story in hardware was 2019 was the year Foldables broke. I guess they kind of broke. Foldables broke.
Yeah,
Foldables folded. The year Foldables folded. So at this time, 2018, we just had rumors of the Galaxy Fold. It wasn't until February 2019 when the Samsung Galaxy Fold actually got announced, and then that whole debacle happened. But honestly, if you look, Samsung Galaxy Fold got the most notice. But if you look at 2019, we had the Samsung Galaxy Fold. We had the Huawei Mate X. We the Motorola Razr 2019 finally got announced. The foldable Razr. The Xiaomi Mi Flex. Oppo has a foldable phone. LG has a foldable phone. I've been saying for a while the future is foldable, and it appears 2019 I was right. Now, whether or not foldable phones actually go mainstream and become, kind of our daily drivers still remains to be seen. Yes. But what was a joke and a punchline a year ago is now very much a reality.
Yeah, and emerged through a very rocky road to get here.
Yes.
Because this was the year that Samsung announced, released, retracted, then re-released the Galaxy Fold, and all along that way, I mean, it was like foldables are doomed. Yet Samsung, Samsung did its thing where it was like, it does some magical trick, and then by the end of the year, you're kind of like, that wasn't that bad. Meanwhile, it seemed like total doom and destruction at the time. So, but I guess it's still pretty early as far as foldables are concerned. It's still very early. We'll see.
It's still so early, and the price point is still prohibitive. I haven't bought one. They're just, until they can't be $2,000 phones, they can't be $1,500 phones. So they're a novelty at this point.
Yes.
But man, once those displays prices start coming down and they get into the sub 1,000 price range, I'm going to be right there. So
yeah. All right, Flo, what you got?
So this one is just kind of circling it back to flagships. Of course, we had the Pixel 3a, which is pretty much the phone of the year. So now we have the Pixel 4. There's nothing inherently wrong with the Pixel 4. It moves the needle forward on, Google's flagships. It's a new phone. It's nice and shiny. It does cool stuff. The back of it doesn't necessarily look like a stovetop the way the back of the iPhone does, which is kind of a nice thing. I personally appreciated that. But just in terms of feature set and it coming out of the gate, it's just kind of meh. It wasn't that it's a bad phone. There's nothing bad about it at all. I mean, for goodness sakes, it's still like a nearly $1,000 phone. And so you're getting all of the capabilities of that, but there's nothing about it that truly is just like lovely and outstanding. It's like buying a luxury car for the heck of it when, you could just buy the Pixel 3a or the Toyota that has all the options you want. I did write about this at Android Police about, when did I write this? Last month? Maybe?
Yep, November 12th.
Last month, and it just kind of, I still have not switched over from the Pixel 3. I keep telling myself that is something I'm going to do, just because I wanted to sell my Pixel 3, make a little bit of money, logistical things like that. But I am just at the point where it's still like the Pixel 4 it's a heavy chunker. Like it's chunky. You know what I mean? Like it's dense. It's a nice solid phone.
It is.
It's got a beautiful display. The face unlock is super fast compared to what we were doing with the fingerprint unlock. But everything else, a lot of the software features, because everything is so AI enabled, right? Because everything kind of does boil down to the software and the software updates. A lot of that stuff is coming to the older Pixels.
Yeah.
Like when we had that Pixel update extravaganza that happened, I think last week, I think the Pixel 2 was on there for a lot of those things. And so it's just kind of, there isn't an immediate reason to update unless you're at that point in the life cycle where you're like, well, I should probably get a new phone because pretty soon this one's no longer going to be supported by Google. So
it was sad because the Pixel 3 and then the Pixel 3a was such a hit. Like even with, putting the Pixel 3a aside, the Pixel 3 is still like, I still recommend the Pixel 3 to people over the Pixel 4.
And it's on sale.
Yeah.
Get it for a good price. Completely agree. Well, we go from the Pixel 4 to, do you remember the Red Hydrogen 1?
You really love this story. You really do.
Yeah, it's very reminiscent to me of the Amazon Fire Phone kind of situation.
Yeah.
It was announced initially in May 18th, 2018. That's when we first heard about the Red Hydrogen 1. This was the phone that had the holographic display, the 3D display. Again, a gimmick that's totally unnecessary, but apparently they thought it was important enough to launch their marquee first big phone. Released in November 2018 in the US. Promised all of these modules and everything. And then basically this phone ended in October. The company founder, Jim Gennard, announced he was retiring, and says that in so doing, he was shutting down the Hydrogen project, which means that anybody that bought this based on the promise of the modules, you just keep waiting because it's not going to happen. This was not an inexpensive phone. It was just a really big, glaring failure. Basically, it was just a really big mark in the Android world as far as like a phone coming from a reputable manufacturer. Sure, they'd never done a phone, but Red has a really stellar reputation when it comes to cameras. And so, and we think about how we use our phones, a lot of people use the camera so much. So there was a whole lot of promise here. It was like, oh my God, Red's getting into the phone world. Like, take their cameras and put it on a phone and you've got something amazing. That's where people jumped to. And it just really didn't happen. And it taught us a lesson along the way. Don't buy phones based on promises because you're probably going to be disappointed, based on some future product that ties into it, based on a promise of a software update. You may get it. You also may not. And if you bought it for that reason, you're going to be pissed. So that's why I like this story. It's a good cautionary tale. So, sorry if you spent $1,300 on this phone. Really sorry if you spent $1,300.
If you
Yeah, me
did,
too.
please tell us about the experience.
Yeah.
Write in a call.
Exactly.
So for my hardware stuff, there's a lot of hardware stories. We talk about hardware all the time, but I just wanted to kind of look back on the hardware that really made a difference for me in 2019. And and this is fresh because it's only since November. But the Nvidia Shield refresh that finally happened after years of the Nvidia Shield being a solid device. With no kind of updates or changes. And then NVIDIA released the NVIDIA Shield TV Pro and the new NVIDIA Shield TV. I picked up the NVIDIA Shield TV Pro, and it has ultimately changed my home entertainment system for the better. Now with my wife and two little ones, it's a lot easier to just throw something up on TV than having to Chromecast from a phone or from a browser. Yeah. Being a cord cutter, it's great to finally be able to leverage Android TV and see what the whole hubbub about the NVIDIA Shield was all about. I was kind of curious for a while, and then finally pulled the trigger once the refresh happened, and was super, super happy with it. And so can't recommend it strong enough. It's my kind of hardware pick of the year, the NVIDIA Shield TV Pro.
Yeah, pretty solid. And I mean, coming off the heels of a piece of hardware that has been updated like crazy, just like a symbol in the industry of how you support your hardware on Android. And they made a really great follow-up device. So
I mean, at this point, I know there probably should be some sort of process for doing so, but I said it before, I joked about it, but I think the original NVIDIA Shield gets into the Android Hall of Fame. Yeah. Just based on the number of years of being there, all the goodwill, all the support, all that sort of stuff, it definitely deserves to be there.
Totally and completely agree with that. Absolutely. Cool. All right, Flo, you got your last pick in hardware.
Yeah, so this one is, again, circling back to IoT, which has become, smart things, not smart things, smart devices, which has become a big part of being a Google/Android users. This was the year that Google became Nest, became Google.
Google became Nest.
If you buy a smart little product now, it's rebranded. So it has the Nest branding attached to it, but it's not. Nest and Google are no longer like these two separate entities, so to speak. They're just one, and the Nest is kind of the brand that lets you know that this stuff is going in your proverbial nest where you're living, versus in your pocket or in your bag as a Chromebook or an Android device would. And so this was kind of to help consolidate the idea that what you are doing on those mobile devices is going to carry over to what you're doing with those smart devices that you have throughout your home. With it brought a couple of, there were little tripping points. Folks were worried about what was going to happen to Nest accounts. It turns out that we all just got migrated over. Now we log in with our Google accounts specifically, which it turns out is actually a lot more secure because there's the addition of the two-factor authentication, which allows you to basically log in to a device and then you have to authenticate it with your phone, which I love. I think that's a great way to do security, especially with regards to internet connected stuff. We also saw a couple of new smart displays come out of the woodworks. We saw the Nest Hub Max. It's no longer called remember we called it the Google Home Hub. It's no longer called that. It was rebranded to the Nest Hub. It's the Nest Mini. All these little kind of subtle things happening, but not so, because now when you're looking at something that's second generation Google in terms of smart stuff, it's actually a Nest product. And overall, I mean, we're just going to see more of this happening in 2020. Right now in the holidays, I'm looking at the Nest Mini 2nd gen. You can buy yourself one of those. I'm sure there's plenty underneath the tree that people got for free with the purchase of something else. Yeah. So Nest and Google officially hanging out in the Nest together.
Best buds. They're Nest buds.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Oh, yeah, I'm not gonna let that one go.
Fine. Yeah, it wasn't very good. I'm tired.
Made me laugh though.
Okay, good. Well, that's the point. My third pick is well, you might as well just go ahead and take. Hold on, let me pull this up. I'm pulling out my OnePlus 7 Pro. Go ahead and take the OnePlus 7 Pro, not because of the OnePlus 7 Pro, because that's coming up in a second, but because of that pop-up cameras as a thing. Yeah, that's right. Because 2019 was the year of pop-up cameras. We actually started to see them on a lot of phones. OnePlus 7 Pro, the Xiaomi Mi 9T and Mi 9T Pro, the Oppo Reno had it, the Asus Zenfone 6, the Galaxy A80, the Realme X, Honor 9X, Vivo Nex 3, and then late in the year, the Motorola One Hyper, all with pop-out cameras in an effort, I imagine, this is usually the reason why, is to minimize the bezels on the front of the display. And I think going into 2019, I thought pop-up cameras were lame. I still don't know that I'm totally sold on them. I still wonder if, you take out a phone at the beach or whatever and it's got the pop-up camera, if you aren't running a little bit of a risk of some dirt getting in there and your phone never works the same again. But the fact that you can drop these things and the second it detects that it's dropped out of your hand, it retracts the camera, like that would help. I don't know. They're neat. They're a curiosity and definitely a thread of 2019. I don't know how much into 2020 and beyond we're going to see these. I just kind of have this feeling that the in-display technology is going to kind of surpass this in short time, in a short amount of time. But nonetheless, 2019 pop-up cameras.
My mother-in-law called the other day on Skype, and it's always so funny because if my husband is sitting on the couch adjacent, I can hear the little whirring of the pop-up cam. It just makes, on his OnePlus, it goes zzz, is it supposed to make a mechanical sound? And I just look over and it's
even better with the mechanical sound.
I don't really notice the mechanical sound. It must have been really quiet there.
It's funny that comes up, and there's my OnePlus 7 Pro with the pop-up camera up, because my last pick for hardware is the OnePlus 7 Pro, as this has been my phone of the year. I went from the OnePlus 6T to the OnePlus 7 to the OnePlus 7 Pro. Or no, I went from the OnePlus 6 to the OnePlus 6T to 7 Pro. I forget the order. But basically, I went to the OnePlus 7 Pro when it came out, like May or June, around there, I think. I think so. And I have not looked back. I've had the opportunity to switch to other phones at any given time, but I'm sticking with the OnePlus 7 Pro. I love the bezel-less or close to bezel-less front, the kind of cascading sides. I love the no pinhole for the front-facing camera. The pop-up camera is great because I'm not a big selfie person. The rare time I take it when I'm holding one of my kids for a photo to send to my wife. That's about it. It's a great phone, and it has been solid. It has been for me a great improvement on the OnePlus 6 line, and just continuing OnePlus's kind of emergence as a dependable brand in the space. It's great to see kind of, there have been a couple of stories that have evolved over the years we've been doing the show, and one of them is the emergence of OnePlus.
Yep.
And what first became a curiosity and kind of this weird little thing and a marketing punchline, has now become a really dependable manufacturer of solid phones.
Yep.
So going into 2020, I'm rocking OnePlus, and I have no plans to go back. So go to another one.
That OnePlus 7 Pro, that's a beast of a phone. That's definitely, easily on the top, 3 devices of the year, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
3A's there.
I've converted a lot of people to this phone who were like, don't want a Pixel, don't want a Samsung. What are my other options? And it's the OnePlus.
Yeah. 7 Pro, 7T. Good lineup, and OnePlus, they have right to be proud of what they're doing, because they've really done a lot in a short amount of time. And
indeed.
The market is it started with enthusiasts, and now it's broadening out, and they deserve that.
Yeah,
so.
It's available at T-Mobile. It's gone mainstream.
Yep. So. All right, that is hardware. I'm sure we left some things out, but we don't care. Those are the things we wanted in there. Okay. Booyah. All right. Let's do some app news now. Starting with Ron.
Yeah. So if I told you an app came out less than a month and a half ago, and it has over 10 million downloads, is currently the #1 app in the Google Play Store charts with over 10 million downloads, you'd say that was a pretty big deal, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
I would say that.
Yeah.
I will say that.
That's the story of Disney Plus. And again, full disclosure, my day job, I am employed by the Greater Walt Disney Company, so this isn't a promotional kind of thing, just reporting on what actually happened. But Disney Plus came out November 12th and kind of heralded what they've been saying is the streaming wars, and it's hard to ignore when, the main portion of this is releasing apps for Android TV, and all that fun stuff, as well as on the iOS side. Disney Plus launched with over 10 million subscribers. Clearly, many of them Android users, as the app has been downloaded over 10 million times. As we go into next year with HBO Max on the horizon and the Peacock from NBC Universal on the horizon, and all these other kind of studio-based streaming apps, Disney Plus is kind of setting the standard, and is going to be the one everyone's compared to. And this is kind of, the Disney Plus streaming wars as a topic is kind of my main app story. But also, I don't want to underscore the fact that this is the year that Amazon and Google finally gave up fighting, and we can now use Chromecast on the Prime Video app. Which opens but it's working fine for me. So, but
is that how you're watching The Expanse? Sorry,
it is actually. Well, actually, I'm using the Android TV app on my Nvidia Shield. But that basically, as I mentioned in the hardware section, I'm a cord cutter. I'm dependent on these streaming services, and it is probably, there's been no better time for watching TV and movies and stuff via Android. And at the same time, it's incredibly stressful because there's too much to watch.
Yep.
But,
there really is. I can't keep up with it all. There was a time that I could have kept up with it all, but definitely now is not that time. Yeah, great pick. I mean, Disney Plus really. I mean, on one hand, I love what I've seen out of Disney Plus. On the other hand, I'm like, damn it, because they're all going to come out with these, I mean, give or take, the level of quality, but they're all going to have this amazing library of content to draw from that's going to make it compelling. So here we are spending $6, $7, $8 per app in order to get access to these libraries, and it's expensive in aggregate.
It's going to end up being the same we paid for cable. That's the irony of it. But what's also interesting is that if you compare this to the launch of Apple TV Plus, as I discovered, you can figure out a way to watch it if you are not in the iOS ecosystem, as I figured out. They just don't have the library of content, the breadth of content. And so that's where Disney and Warner Brothers with HBO Max and stuff like that are going to be successful, because they have this huge library of content, and they've got a pipeline for new content. And listen, say what you will about the new Star Wars movie, The Mandalorian has been one of the best stories of the year in entertainment, and Baby Yoda has taken over the world. And that that's literally all happened in the last month. So just think about that. Yeah, that's what's crazy. So
doesn't Apple TV have an Emmy nomination too?
Yeah, for the morning show, which I heard is not good, but whatever.
Well, but I mean, I just mean to add that to just the significance of how these things are going. It's a good thing.
It wasn't an Emmy.
It's
a Golden Globe.
Oh, okay.
Globe.
Yes,
you're right.
Yes, that's the first one of the year.
Emmys are September. Yeah.
It's a good thing Hulu and Netflix have finally decided to do their own content, because, I mean. Imagine what's going to happen when NBC says, "Sorry, we're just going to put Friends on our streaming app by Netflix." No,
they've already done it. They've already done it.
I missed that.
Oh yeah, no. Friends is pulled from Netflix. It's going to be on HBO Max. It's a Warner Brothers property. That is literally already happening.
See, this is starting to overwhelm me a little bit.
It's the streaming wars.
Streaming wars.
Sorry, you guys didn't say it yet. So, Ron, are you saying that Disney Plus is the way?
Yeah, well done.
Okay.
I like what you did there.
Yeah, except The Last Jedi isn't on there yet, and I was trying to watch it before I go see the new one tomorrow, and I'm not paying for it.
Last Jedi,
Sorry,
you find that on Netflix, as I discovered last night.
Until the end of the month.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's on
But
Netflix.
I canceled Netflix for Disney.
Oh, see.
Just wait until January 1st, Flo. You'll be fine.
All right, Flo, what you got?
What do I have? So this kind of piggybacks on the RCS conversation we had earlier. But I wanted to bring it to the table because this is something that we've been talking about all year. Anytime anybody mentions anything about messaging, there's just like this low groan that comes from, the audience of life. Anyway,
Sound like that?
just everybody's watching going, what messaging? Everyone is annoyed about messages on Android. And I agree. It's a fragmented experience. It's nothing like what Apple users have in regards to iMessages. It's kind of annoying having to live in a proprietary funnel compared to what Apple users have. It's annoying that when I get video from my iPhone using Friends that it's like low bit rate and like all these little nuances that happen, because the thing is, as a society, as humans, we're using these text methods to communicate with each other throughout our busy lives. And it'd be nice if it were a little more streamlined across the board. But if you're an Android user, you're effectively still a punchline. You're a green bubble to your Android using friends, your Apple using friends. There was a story this year about I think a high schooler or a middle schooler who was outed of a group text because she didn't have the right phone and she had to ask her parents.
That's stupid.
It's just, granted, I'm bringing that in as a little bit of hyperbole, which is how ridiculous this has become. But it is a good indication to just say that 2020 needs to be the year that Google just kind of settles what is the messaging trajectory. If it's going to be RCS, just lean into it 100%. And don't worry about integrating us with Apple users, because clearly that's not a priority for Apple. iMessage is going to continue to live on its own. And I mean, what I have so far with Android messages, I'm fine with, in terms of have a browser-based app that I can use to reply to messages. I have a handy Microsoft app if I need to check on my phone, on my Windows PC. These things, they all really help kind of bring it all together. So I hope 2020 we can be a little less annoyed with what Google is doing with its messaging trajectory.
There's always hope.
Yeah.
We've always got that, at least.
Yeah.
So frustrating.
Yeah.
'Tis the season for hoping.
'Tis the season. Hoping. I remember hoping that this little product called Inbox would stick around.
No.
I remember hoping that pretty strongly. I had a lot of hope about Inbox because it helped me. It really improved my emailing capabilities, and it was very forward thinking. And Google killed it. I'm still bitter. Do I look bitter? Because I am. I'm still bitter that there is no more Google Inbox. There's also no more Google Plus and a few other things, but I'm just having a hard time getting over this whole inbox gone thing. My inbox sucks now. Everything that I had my systems dialed in. My inbox was neat. It was clean, and now everything's just messy and disorganized, and there's all these unreads, because if I keep them unread, then maybe I'll go back to them, but then I never go back to them, and then they fall out of view, and I forget about them forever. Maybe there was some important information in there, and it's just gone. It's all gone.
For the audio listeners, Victor was slowly panning in onto Jason as he was ranting about this. It was quite a beautiful sight to behold.
Thank you for the slow push. I appreciate it.
Poor Jason.
I'll never get over it. I can't quit you, Inbox. Okay.
Jason, you should use that email program that I brought to the arena. I think you were on vacation when I brought it. I don't remember.
There have been
There's so many options. There's so many options that do similar things.
It's just not Inbox.
Spark and all
it's true. It's not Inbox. It's a third party. I mean,
yeah, you're right. I should.
That's it. This was the year that I really kind of recommitted to Gmail as an app and as on the web and all that sort of stuff, and I've been super happy with it. So
I'm not.
I don't know.
I just like the snooze and come back later feature.
They have that in Gmail.
I know, but I don't want like Google to decide when to come back to me like 5 days later, which like, I mean, I appreciate it.
Well, that's the nudges, but yeah.
I appreciate the nudging, especially being a freelancer and like running my own business. But anyway, sometimes I want things at 6 p.m., not 11 a.m.
Hallelujah.
All right, so one non-story for me from 2019 was that another one of my favorite pet topics, augmented reality, didn't break through again this year, and now I'm questioning if it ever will. With the, after Pokemon Go a couple of years ago, and we've had, the Harry Potter thing come out and all this sort of stuff, and we see kind of fun little experiments and things like that, but
Minecraft Earth.
AR just still isn't a thing. It just isn't a thing. It's a novelty at best, and I wonder if it ever will be a thing.
And even the big thing, like the big AR things, like Magic Leap, that had all of this like energy and money and promise. I mean, even $500 million of Google's money behind it, like fizzled. Yeah, it's
totally
right
just totally just vaporware. And it's just not a real thing. I'm sorry. And I want it to be, and no one's figured out the killer app. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago, and it's something that keeps on my mind. And I'm always looking for AR apps. In fact, I had a couple of AR apps that did really well in the arena this year. But at the end of the day, there's not a single app I use that uses augmented reality and use it on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you're not shopping at IKEA or on House on a regular basis. Because if you were, you'd be putting that chair in your living room.
Yeah.
And seeing how it looks before.
But there's no meatballs or ice cream with AR.
You can't have everything. Can't have everything, Flo. No meatballs. Okay. What's your next pick, Flo?
Well, you can't have everything if you pay a monthly fee to Google for the Play Pass.
I like what you did there.
Or at least what I'm trying to attempt to do. So if you were following along with the arena the last couple of months, wow. This happened in September, actually. I can't believe it. It's been since September. So Google Play Pass was announced in September. We're now at nearly the end of December. And the introductory price was $1.99 if you're signing on to kind of test drive it for the next year. And I immediately signed on because I wanted to see what a subscription service from Android's App Store would look like. This kind of came hot off the heels. Apple had announced that it was doing its own little pass thingy, whatever it's called. And of course, that one was going to have exclusives. This one is a little more like, how about you just pay to remove ads and you're paying to get the full version of games versus having to pay for all these in-app purchases. So far, I'm enjoying what I'm getting from it, but I'm also still just paying $2 a month. Next year, this is going to go up to $5 a month. Mm-hmm. And so it's really figuring out if Google will take 2020 to kind of go in, use the stats and see what the current subscribers are using, what they're really taking advantage of, and seeing if they can add on that and make some sort of value. Out of the get-go, the Play Pass was just quite an amalgamation of apps. It was a lot of AAA indie games, which was great. But if you've been playing games on an Android device for a while, you probably already own some of those games, like Stardew Valley, for instance, which is, I think, typically $8 without the Pay Pass for the full version. Now it's kind of grown a little bit. I've brought some apps again to the arena just to kind of like show what it is that you're getting. But still a little bit of work to be done. But I really like the premise, and I hope that 2020 brings more reason for me to want to continue paying the monthly subscription, because I think my $2 a month ends next November. Right. So you have 11 months, Google.
Convince Flo.
Convince me. You have 11 months.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see, because I mean, $5 is definitely a lot different than $2. I mean, it's still not that much, but
it's almost a Disney Plus.
I was going to say, yeah, it's getting closer to like yet another subscription to a streaming service or something. And at some point, there's only so many subscriptions we can subscribe to. So yeah, I'll be curious to see where that leads for you. My second pick, I'm not really all that excited about, because it is what it is. It's apps that track you, steal your data, ad fraud, and kill puppies.
Jeez, Jason, you had to add the...
Yeah, apps are doing some pretty bad things. including, actually, I haven't heard any stories of apps killing puppies necessarily, but definitely lots of stories of the other three, like Do Global, for example, committing the ad fraud, apps tracking, recording all activity on device, et cetera, et cetera. I just feel like there were tons of stories, and there probably are each and every year, but man, I was just seeing so many of them this year, and almost to the point where it was like, I'm exhausted by the amount of these stories. How often do we really want to put this into the show? And, like on one hand, I feel the responsibility to put them in the show because, hey, we got to tell people about it. But on the other hand, yay, here's another story about how apps are bad for you. And I want good things, not bad things. So anyways, it was just kind of an exhausting thread throughout the year, and I have hope, but not a whole lot of confidence that 2020 will be different. I think it's gonna be a lot of the same. Sorry to bring y'all down.
Look before you tap to download, folks.
Yes, that's what they say. That's what they teach you in driver's ed. All right, Ron, you got the last one.
I do. So what I wanted to do was we wanted to go back and take a look at some of our arena picks, and of all the apps that we picked in the arena, which ones were either our favorite or whatever by the end of the year. And I looked at it and I was like, all right, what one am I still using? What one are still making a difference? Did I install, play with, and then uninstall or stop using or whatever? That I wouldn't pick that. But the app that seems to have stuck the longest since I installed it was a very simple one called Dark Mode. Going back to what we talked about in the news, how dark mode took over the world. A developer by the name of Julian Eggers did a very simple app that enables dark mode on apps that don't have it. If you're on an operating system that doesn't have it enabled at this point, and really what it did was it enabled dark mode for a lot more users. In fact, this app has over 5 million installs in the short time period. When I talked about it on the arena, I think it had less than 10,000. So it has grown pretty fast and pretty well. And it's just a very simple app, and a developer who came up with a good idea saw a hole and filled it. And it's an app that is in daily use on my phone. I don't even notice it because the apps that I have slip into dark mode when I want them to, and it works great. So
nice.
Yep.
Good arena pick.
That won the arena, in fact, as well in my legendary run to the top. And I almost made it. But so.
Oh man, so close. I mean, right up to the very end, you almost made it, Ron. Dark mode. All right, Flo, what's yours?
I brought an app that I didn't realize I was paying for all this time. I had brought it to the arena. I can't remember if it won or not, but the reason I'm bringing it today is because this is our end of the year episode. Effectively, we're celebrating the holidays. And if it weren't for this app, I would not have access to all the smooth Christmas jazz I could want.
Smooth Christmas jazz.
As we near the end of my pregnancy here, I really just need relaxing music to kind of the anxiety is super real. It just comes on in waves. And so I've been listening to a lot of smooth jazz to kind of help me. Because if I listen to my normal sad music, my I'm not doing so hot music in my brain, then I end up not doing so hot. But then my other music is pop music, and it's just too, exciting for how I'm feeling. So smooth jazz has been this nice. And so I've been doing the Christmas smooth jazz station. Absolutely beautiful. So the app is called Radio Tunes. And it's from the same folks who do Digitally Imported. And Digitally Imported, for those who subscribe to it, they have it's trance, techno, dance music, electronica. That's kind of what they started at. And you pay for an annual subscription to get access to these radio channels. It turns out that there are other apps that you can download that the company also manages, and this is one of them. I liked it because it has it kind of gives me the radio feel that I don't really get from Spotify, because as much as I love Spotify for curating playlists and listening to stuff, new albums and new songs that have come out, it's not very good at the radio part. because it relies so much on playlists. And so this is actually, they're curated radio stations by people behind the scenes. And you can use it for free. You don't have to pay for it like I do. It's just a perk for me because I'm already paying for the membership. It's ad supported if you decide you want to download it and check it out. I just like the idea that when you go into the Play Store, you can find these kind of radio apps to fulfill your genre needs. I'm part of the old internet, and so I feel like this is a part of the old internet that I like to still see around.
Ye
not
old
everything
internet. That's old spelled with an E at the end.
Well,
The
no,
old
that's
internet.
that's pre my time. I'm
Oh,
talking like AIM days.
All right. I don't want to go down this rabbit hole.
Radio tunes, good pick, Flo. The app that I chose wasn't even my app. It was yours, Ron, and I was your
I'm flattered.
I was your surrogate to demonstrate it when you were out, and you asked me to show off an app while you were
That's
out.
right.
Yes.
And it was called Kids, if you remember.
Yes.
And I noticed on the YouTube it was a bit that we released on YouTube, and someone in the comments was like, "You know how hard this app is to find in the Play Store? Like, how can I find it? You just type in Kids, you find a million things. Do a search for Kids Playables, and you should find it. $2.99. This thing was weird. Like, I just love how strange."
So experiential
and bizarre, and it's kind of a game, but it's also kind of like you feel like they're making a point of some sort, but it's hard to know what the point is. But it's just bizarre, and it's just a bunch of stick figures doing weird things in different scenarios with lots of them or just a couple of them. I don't know. It's just a unique experience. You don't see many things on mobile like this. And it was one of the weirdest things that I think we showed off app-wise on the show all year. So I had to pick that one. So good pick. I wish it were mine, but it was yours, Ron. I should also say, Flo, Radio Tunes did win the arena.
Oh, yay.
What about Kids?
Kids did not win.
No,
kids did not win at all.
Kids
People
did
did not
not
understand.
win.
But I think we should, before we wrap up, we should take a moment and we should applaud Flo for winning this year, for this year's arena champion. So congratulations. If we had
Good
a belt
job.
or some sort of trophy, you would take it. I don't know if the belt will be able to fit around you these days, but it would fit later on.
Yeah, it'll fit in a few months.
Yeah. So, but way to go, Flo. You did it. You defied math and you came in first. So
Congratulations. Yeah, you
I
defied
tried.
Ron's last minute attempts to somehow win magically. I don't know how Ron planned on making that happen. Also, big time thanks to Wade County. Thank you, Bleak, in chat. Wade County did all the math for this throughout the entire year and continues to help us out and hook us up. Apparently, we would just fall apart and fizzle away if we didn't have Wade County doing the math
It's
for us.
absolutely true.
And thank you to everybody who keeps the wiki updated and the
Oh, my
arena
goodness.
stats and all the data that happens behind us and behind the scenes. We want to thank everybody for their contributions. We can't do it without you. So that's awesome.
Absolutely.
So, and even
Got
more
some
so, we'll
awesome
continue
fans.
on the back padding. But hey, man, this is end of 2019. It's an end of a decade with the exception
kidding.
of one year in this past decade, which was 2010. All 9 years I spent right here next to Jason doing all about Android every Tuesday. And we should applaud Flo because I didn't realize this until I looked it up, but Flo's been with us for 4 years now. So I didn't realize Eileen was only with us for a year and a half and Gina for 2 years. Flo's been with us for 4 years, which is longer than both of them combined.
Dang, you put
So,
yes, that's
yeah.
crazy, Ron. I hadn't made that connection. That's crazy.
Yeah, so
Aw.
so we're wrapping up our 452nd episode after 9 years, and it's the highlight of my week, and this is just great. And so huge thanks to Jason and everyone at Twit and to Flo for making this another great Victor, another Burke, another great year in the books. Couldn't be prouder.
Yeah. Oh, I've got all the feels right now. It's so true.
Happy holidays.
Especially when you look at it as like the decade, right? Like this is the end of the 2010s, and the 2010s Android was one of the big stories of the 2010s.
Yeah, and we were right
Period.
here.
Mobile was huge. Android was right there.
Yep.
Like along with how large mobile was as like a blanket category in technology and just the world in general, Android made a lot of that possible.
Android fought.
And we were here
Android
with it.
fought its way to remain where it is. Remember that this is the decade we had BlackBerry 10. Remember?
Yeah.
We had WebOS.
Yeah.
We had even Samsung tried its hand with Tizen, and that just kind of whittled away into its own little project box.
Wearables. Yeah.
Yeah, and Google's Android just kind of remains strong. It's the biggest platform in the world. And I think that we should also just thank everybody for tuning in every week to just listen about all this stuff that keeps
100%.
happening.
Indeed.
Yep.
Indeed. What a great show. What a great community. And I love doing the show with all of us.
Likewise.
It's
highlight of the week.
We're
Absolutely
a little
agree.
family.
We are. We are. Speaking of family, it's time for us to get to our family because on the day that you hear this, it's Christmas Eve. So it's time for you to get to your family too.
And it is after 10 o'clock and my niece needs to go to bed. So I need to get out of her bedroom.
All right. We won't do the long drawn out goodbyes on this one. Flo, Ron, I love you guys. Thank you so much for doing the show.
I love you guys.
What's that?
I got a quick plug.
Oh,
though.
okay.
We still
We
got
can
a
do
plug.
it. Yeah. Sorry. I forgot about that.
If you're a geek and a nerd like all of us, you probably went to see Star Wars. So go listen to iFanboy to hear me talk about Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. You can check that out at ifanboy.com, the comic book podcast that I helped co-found, and I come back to talk about Star Wars movies. So go check that out.
Love
there
it.
you go.
All right. Thank you,
Enjoy.
Ron. Flo, do you have anything to throw in there?
Guys, I'm taking some time off. I'm going to be here.
We're prepared.
I'm just going to be here growing my Pokemon and eating cookies.
Gestating.
Yes.
Literally gestating.
Yes, indeed. Cool. Take care of yourself. Have a great holiday. Victor, thank you so much, man. Each and every week, you help us out tremendously by doing what you do so well. So thank you.
No problem.
Yeah,
It's
you-
always fun every week.
Right on.
And you hooked me up with so many Pokemon cards in this decade. Thank you, Victor, for passing on what your children are no longer interested in to me.
To another decade of Pokemon trading cards. And then I should also mention that next week on this show, we do not have a live show, but we have a best of 2019 clips show. A lot of the things that we talked about tonight are encapsulated on next week's episode. And thank you, Victor, for editing that together. So look forward to that. I should also mention Hands on Tech. Go to twit.tv/hot. Episode 72. We all four of us here, Ant, Micah, Leo, and myself, took a look at kind of our favorite technology from the year, tech gadgets of 2019. Really good round table discussion on a lot of tech, so you might enjoy watching that as well. Twit.tv, and then search for Hands on Tech. You'll find episode 72, and it will be there. That is it for this week. We publish every Tuesday evening, twit.tv/AAA. You already know that. You're subscribed, right? If you're not, get subscribed. Then you won't miss any episode that we put out going forward as we enter the next decade of All About Android. That is it for this week and this decade, basically.
Yep.
We'll see you next decade on All About Android.
2020.
Bye, everybody. Man, it sounds so big when you put it like that.
I know.